There should be no shame in admitting that we've all needed help beating a game before. Look, video games are hard, and we don't have all the time in the world, so sometimes you just need an answer so you don't have to spend your whole afternoon pushing blocks around on ice. When that time comes to break down and seek help, there are several options available. You could read a strategy guide, watch a video walkthrough, or just ask an older sibling to do it for you. But sometimes all the help you need is right there in the instruction manual. Though they're often seen as nothing more than a place for health and safety warnings or booklets full of notes, video game manuals can also contain rather crucial information about the game. Sometimes so crucial that it's actually required reading for anyone who wants to get to the end. And I don't just mean in the sense of telling you that the A button makes you jump. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. I'm Peter from TripleJump, and here are 10 games you couldn't finish without the manual. Number 10. Resonance of Fate. One of the most important rules of being a hero is that you're only as good as your weapon. Where would King Arthur be without Excalibur, or Luke Skywalker without his lightsaber, or Cloud Strife without a sword the size of a small car? Keeping your weapons in tip-top shape is vital for anyone looking to save the world, so you'd think the least a video game developer could do is make that process easy. Resonance of Fate is an RPG with a unique industrial steampunk setting, which means that rather than swords and shields, the main character's primary weapons of choice are pistols and machine guns. It's possible to earn many additional parts that can be used to augment your firearms, such as scopes, silencers, and handguards, but these won't be any use to you unless you actually equip them. Now, this is not a complicated process, or at least it wouldn't be if it weren't for the fact that the game doesn't actually tell you the full controls for how to do it, such as how to actually position the weapon that you are customizing. If you don't read about it in the manual, you'll be left unable to properly optimize your weapons with as many upgrades as possible. You're going to need them if you don't want to go into battle half-cocked. Number 9. Jurassic Park. In hindsight, it's easy to say that building a theme park full of live dinosaurs was perhaps not the million-dollar idea it was made out to be. But it did turn out to be a pretty good idea for a movie. That movie, of course, was Jurassic Park, which went on to become one of the most successful film franchises of all time, and inspired a healthy supply of tie-in video games, from the great to the not-so-great. Released in conjunction with the original movie, Jurassic Park for the Sega Master System combines driving and platforming segments as the player explores 4 levels in any order, with a 5th unlocked upon clearing the first 4. But not for everyone, apparently. As is explained in the game's manual, the final level, and thus the true ending, can only be accessed if the entire game is beaten without using a single continue. Easier said than done, perhaps, but simple enough unless you're one of the many players who overlooked that particular tidbit in the instructions and were left scratching their heads at why their game ended so abruptly. The problem was compounded by online walkthroughs containing erroneous information, leading confused players further astray, leaving them so preoccupied with whether they could follow a walkthrough that they didn't stop to think whether they should. Number 8. Daffy Duck: The Marvin Missions. As physical manuals have increasingly become a thing of the past, it's hard to imagine a future where they might suddenly make a comeback, but I suppose anything is possible in the 24th and a half century. In Daffy Duck: The Marvin Missions, you play as the classic Looney Tunes waterfowl in his persona of the spacefaring adventurer Duck Dodgers, as he runs, jumps, and shoots his way through enemies in pursuit of his eternal nemesis, Marvin the Martian. It's a pretty by-the-numbers run-and-gun platformer without much of note, except for its intensely high difficulty that was a frequent subject of comment in reviews. What may have played a hand in that perceived difficulty is the game's weapon upgrade system. For each enemy defeated, the player earns a number of points, and they can spend those points by inputting a quick button combination while paused to upgrade weapons in different ways. While this upgrade system is explained in the manual, there is nothing in the game itself to suggest it even exists, much less how to use it, and the actual method was often circulated online labeled as a cheat code rather than a core function of the game that's required to progress in certain points. And to think they say that cheaters never prosper. Number 7. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog is known for a few different things: his speed, his copious amounts of friends, and his aversion to water. I mean, the poor bloke had to wear a life vest just to compete at the Olympics. Suffice to say, large bodies of water have long been a major hazard in Sonic games, dating back to his very first outing on the Mega Drive. In the 4th level, Labyrinth Zone, the blue blur must navigate some tricky platforming sections both above and below the surface of the water in some flooded ruins, a task that's much easier said than done given his propensity when underwater for too long for drowning. The big baby. Fortunately though, Sonic can refill his depleted lungs with the help of conveniently placed air bubbles underwater, a handy little trick that's spelled out clearly in the manual. Unfortunately, though it's well known now, it wasn't back when the game first released, and some players were going too fast to stop and read the instructions. Without realizing there was a means to postpone that watery grave, it was commonly assumed the only solution was to speed through the underwater segments as fast as possible, which should be pretty fast considering it's Sonic. Unfortunately though, not even the fastest thing alive can outrun death. Not without some bubbles, anyway. Number 6. Tunic. Congratulations everyone, without even reading the manual, you managed to find the wildcard entry! As we said in our previous entry, games that actually include physical instruction manuals seem to be a thing of the past, so much so that actually finding one feels like unearthing an ancient relic, sometimes quite literally. Tunic is an indie adventure game that wears its influences on its sleeve, borrowing tropes from games like The Legend of Zelda and building on them with fresh ideas. The world in which Tunic takes place is full of mystery, and the game doesn't trouble itself with trying to explain everything to the player. It's your job to find out for yourself. Scattered throughout the land are loose pages of the Tunic instruction manual that you can collect and review to learn how to actually play the game. All the text is written in a fictional language, however, so the challenge lies in deciphering the meaning through images and a few handwritten notes left behind by someone else. More than just a how-to guide on the basics of moving and attacking, Tunic's in-game manual is an essential collectible that helps move the story forward as it drip-feeds hints and clues to the player until it all gradually comes together. There are many secrets to be discovered in Tunic, but if you want to learn them all, well, you'll just have to read the manual. Number 5. Top Gun. Flying a plane in real life is incredibly tough, requiring years of instruction and training. And unfortunately for us poor sods condemned to remain on the ground, it's not any easier in video games either. As you may have guessed, Top Gun for the NES is the video game based on the classic 1986 movie that puts players in the virtual cockpit of a fighter jet to take on enemies in a series of high-stakes dogfights. It's incredibly difficult, requiring tight reflexes and mastery of the controls, but the biggest challenge comes at the end of each level. Landing. In order to safely land your plane after a successful mission, the player has to closely monitor their plane's gauges to ensure they come in at precisely the correct speed and angle, or else crash land in a spectacular fireball. The game itself, though, gives little guidance on how to achieve the ideal position for your plane, so unless you read up on the exact measurements you need in the manual, you're probably going to end up rather crispy. And to be honest, even if you did read it, it's still fairly likely in this game. It happens to the best of us. Number 4. Super Princess Peach. How many times has Princess Peach been kidnapped? Probably more times than you can count on your fingers and toes combined, so it's only fair the roles get reversed once in a while. It was for this reason Super Princess Peach was released as the titular monarch's first major leading role, which sees her turning the tables by setting out to rescue Mario from Bowser instead. Due to the simplified nature of its gameplay and level design, many critics found Super Princess Peach to be just a bit too easy, but even a cakewalk can have a stumbling block at the end. Upon completing all 8 of the game's worlds, many players were a bit startled when the game seemed to simply stop. Perhaps Bowser just decided to give up and go home? Sadly, no. Instead, the final world has to be unlocked by rescuing all of the captive toads scattered throughout the game, that's 3 per level, a requirement that's never stated in the game, but is made very clear in the game's manual. God, sounds like a lot of effort. Maybe it's time the toads took a leaf out of Princess Peach's book and started rescuing themselves instead. Number 3. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. The Pokemon series has built its appeal on the tagline of "Gotta catch 'em all," but as more and more Pokemon are added with each passing year, that becomes increasingly difficult. When will enough be enough, for crying out loud? Still, the ultimate challenge in any Pokemon game is to fill out the Pokédex by tracking down every single bird, bug, and electric rodent across the world. And that includes the one-of-a-kind and difficult-to-find legendary Pokemon. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire had their own fair share of mythical beasts, and the most mysterious among them were the trio of Regirock, Regice, and Registeel. Am I saying those right? I don't know or care. In order to find and capture these 3, players must first enter a mysterious undersea cave and solve a riddle carved in stone. Now, you'd have your work cut out with that alone, but there's the minor complication that the riddle is written in Braille. Nowhere else in the game is there the use of Braille, nor any means of decoding it other than what the player can find in real life. Fortunately though, the instruction booklet for the game's European release included a chart to help players translate the riddle, ensuring they would have the resources on hand to capture every single Pokemon in the game. 3 down, 1,000 to go. Number 2. La-mulana. Manuals once played a very important role in the days before things like tutorials and online guides existed, so it figures that a game meant to call back to those days would also bring back the instruction manual. La-mulana is a platformer designed to be both a throwback to and an evolution of the games of yesteryear, with ancient ruins full of deadly enemies, screen-filling bosses, and many, many, many esoteric puzzles. It's a tough nut to crack in many ways, and very few of its fans can claim to have beaten it without ever using a walkthrough to find an answer that eluded them. While it's far from a comprehensive guide on the subject though, the game does include a digital instruction manual that provides a plethora of useful and very specific tips, including where exactly to find a crucial item early on that will make the rest of the game vastly more forgiving, though still not exactly easy. If you dig a little deeper, there are even more vital secrets hidden in the manual's teachings, including some that come into play at the very end of the game and could potentially save you hundreds of hours. Instruction manuals may be old hat, but this is one that doesn't belong in a museum quite yet. And number 1, Star Tropics. Nintendo's vaults are filled to the brim with classic titles just begging for a re-release or remake of some kind, each with their own vocal contingent of fans. Somewhere in there, buried beneath the F-Zeros and Earthbounds, is an oft-forgotten NES game known as Star Tropics. Borrowing many elements from the Zelda series, Star Tropics is an adventure game about a young man named Mike Jones on a quest to find his missing uncle. A quest that involves trekking through dangerous dungeons and battling enemies with little more than a yo-yo and a baseball bat. To set the story in motion, the game's manual included a letter from Mike's uncle explaining his situation, and remember that because it's of vital importance to beating the game. Late in the adventure, Mike needs to recover a code and is told he can do so by dipping his uncle's letter in water, by which the game means the player must physically dip the letter included with the manual in water to reveal the code. If you happen to have, say, a second-hand copy that didn't come with the letter, then it was simply tough luck for you. Later re-releases of Star Tropics, though, have preserved the letter in digital format. But you know, it's just not the same. And neither is it the same that games like this don't exist anymore. Why didn't Hideo Kojima make me dip my Death Stranding manual in Monster Energy drink? I'm disappointed.